Today I'm working on my Summit headers. I think the part number on these guys is G9001, and these are the painted version. The Roadmaster used to have the coated version of these, and I think you can buy them. They're about twice the price of the normal painted ones, which I think was, at the time, it was 250 bucks. But the coating flakes off the first time it sees a winter, so I figured I might as well just buy the painted version and go over them with some barbecue paint, which is what I'm doing now. I just had to strip these down first, and also I'm going to cut the flanges off as well. I already have one done, as you can see over here. There's a little bit of paint I got to get down towards the collector, but honestly down to the bottom it's not as big of a deal to get all the paint stripped off there for new, considering no one's going to see it. I think it's more important for it to look good from the top, honestly. Considering that these are painted headers, they're going to rust regardless. It doesn't really matter. I mean, the better the prep work, the longer it'll take for them to start rusting, but it doesn't really matter. I just want them to look alright from the top. And like I said, I'm also cutting these flanges off because I run a slip fit X-pipe on the Roadmaster rather than the flanged X-pipe. That's basically just because when you go over speed bumps or you hit a bump, if you bottom out on these flanges, your exhaust is going to leak and you're going to have a hard time sealing it, and it totally sucks. Honestly, it's easier just to do the slip fit and use a little bit of aluminum tape to kind of make your own gasket, and that's always worked for me. So I spent all night working on the headers, and I finally got them stripped down to where I want them. So right now I'm just going to take them out to the hose and rinse them off a little bit, then dry them, and I'll hang them up for paint. So I'm on coat number 2 of these headers, and I'm going to let them cure for a little while longer, flip them over, and then do the other sides. What I'm using is Rust-Oleum high heat. Looks like this. You can get it at Lowe's. It's only $3 or $4 a can. Seems to work pretty well for exhaust from what I've noticed. I've used the VHT header paint and engine enamel in the past, and honestly didn't really like either. I think the Rust-Oleum seems to work a lot better at a fraction of the cost. So while that's curing, what I'm working on over here is trying to measure for push rods. And as you can see, I swapped out one of the valve springs for this low tension. I think it's a comp check spring. Basically just using the same locks in the retainer from the Crane duals. I just pulled that out for right now, because you have to, when you're measuring for push rod length, you have to use a low tension spring, otherwise there's a chance that you can compress the lifter and that's no good. That'll give you a false reading. You'll end up with the wrong length push rods. But all I've done is swap out this valve spring. I've put the guide plate on, and the rocker studs on. Everything's sort of mocked up how it will be when I go to set the lash finally. And I put a little bit of dry erase marker on the valve tip. And so all I'm really going to do is set these guys at 0 lash, and put my preload on, and then turn the motor on, or turn the motor over, I should say. I was having a pretty hard time getting a good reading with these dry erase markers I've been using. They're cheapy ones from Walmart. It might not be the markers though. It could be the machining of the valve tips or the machining of the rollers on these rockers. I don't know. But even though the rocker is fully centered on the valve tip, it doesn't really appear to be, like, usually you would see a stripe across the valve tip right in the center when the contact pattern looks good, but for whatever reason I'm having a hard time getting that. It looks to be kind of only really wiping on the left side, but I can tell that the push rod length that I have right now, which is 7.150, it seems to be good. It's pretty well centered, which is nice because I already have these push rods on hand. They're Howards. They came out of the Camaro, just ones I've been saving. So the comp 7.250s weren't doing it for me. So what I was basically doing right there was just setting up cylinder number 1 by basically moving the guide plate around to get both the rockers centered on their respective valve tips. What you want is you want the tip of the rocker to be right over the tip of the valve, perfectly centered. You don't want any sort of offset going on here. You want it to be as centered as it can possibly be. And there's going to be a little bit of wiggle room because of the way the push rod's going to move in the guide plate slot. But you try to want to minimize any sort of offset that you're going to get there, because the more offset or the more misalignment you have, the more chance that you're just going to wear out your valve guides. But the other thing that I was doing is I went and I fully set up the cylinder, and then I was rotating the engine around just to make sure that the push rod isn't going to come in contact with anything throughout its sweep. What you can find with some guide plates is that the push rod will come in contact with the bottom of the groove for that, and then you'll have metal on metal contact, and then you have the issue of your push rods bending or the actual rounded portion of it not being seated properly, and then you'd have oiling issues up top. But basically you just want to make sure you have a reasonable amount of clearance between the push rod and the bottom of the slot. Otherwise you have to take a Dremel to it and open that up a little bit. I had that issue with the AFRs on the Camaro, but these Jegs guide plates and all these Scorpions and everything, and the push rod length that I'm going for seems fine. I guess it has, I'm not really good at eyeballing it, but there's enough clearance there. And when I rotated the engine, it didn't appear that the push rod was getting any closer or was coming in contact with anything. So that's good. All I'm really going to do beyond here is go through and adjust the rest of these guide plates, make sure everything's centered. What you have to do with ported heads like these, because these are Lord Elliott ported heads, with the aluminum castings, what'll happen a lot with the porting is that the bottom of the rocker stud boss, I should say, where this threads into, the very bottom of it when you have a larger port is going to protrude into the intake. So you have to use some sort of some sealant. I'm using Permatex #2 on the threads of that. Just on all the intakes though. You don't have to worry about the exhaust because there's nothing protruding there. Alright, fast forward to the next day. Sorry I didn't get any time lapses for me doing any of the accessories or bolting the intake down, or also the fuel rail and the injectors and cleaning everything up, but my camera died. This stuff's not that hard to do anyway. Basically all I've been doing is just kind of wandering around the garage looking for missing bolts, bits and pieces, but so far it's going together pretty well. As it sits right now, there's still no headers on it. I was hoping a friend would come by and help me install them, but it doesn't seem like anybody's available today. I was going to try to test fire it, but I decided not to. What I have to do beyond here is I still have to set the lash for all the rockers, and I guess put the rest of the accessories on, Loctite the crank hub and the harmonic balancer, do spark plugs and wires. A lot of this stuff I've been holding off on just because there's like a certain order that I want to do it all in. Like I haven't put any of the plugs and wires in yet because I want to hook the starter motor up, crank the motor over quite a bit to build some oil pressure to prime the motor before I actually go and fire it up. The car's been sitting for over a year, and I'm sure there's not a whole lot of oil in there anymore. So I just kind of want to get all the juices flowing before I do anything. Same thing sort of goes for the rocker lash. I haven't set the lash on the entire motor just yet because I'm not entirely sure if these valve covers are going to fit, or if I'm going to have to do any grinding on the tops of the rockers or anything just to make everything clear. So that I've held off on. I think I'm going to do that next weekend. Right now I've just been keeping myself busy with all these little bits and pieces, which honestly takes more time. But hopefully I'll be able to fire it pretty soon. It's getting there. Then beyond that, once the motor runs, it's pretty much just a matter of figuring out all the brakes, doing the suspension, getting the diff in there, put this new drive shaft in. It's the one on the right, shortened Crown Vic shaft. And then, yeah, then I'll take it on the maiden voyage. Alright, so here's the updated list, and as you can see, I'm starting to cross some stuff off. I don't know, maybe I'm about halfway there. Who knows? A lot of this stuff, though, I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to tackle just yet. Like, for example, the body bushings down here. That I can do later. That's not that pertinent. I don't have to do it right now. Same thing with the front suspension. All I'm really going to do with the front suspension is just put the new springs in and kind of feel it out. The easiest thing for me to do with the front suspension is probably just going to be to buy new control arms for the uppers and lowers, considering that I'm probably just going to destroy the stamped steel ones when I take them apart. The rear suspension's still getting addressed, and the brakes and all that stuff. But yeah, I'd say it's about I don't know, maybe a month away, 2 months. It'll be ready by spring. Hopefully by the time the weather's nice, the car will be ready too, and I'll be out there driving it. Alright, one last thing. Got the battery on the float charger, and hopefully it'll be ready for me by next weekend or maybe the one after that, whenever I decide. I know the Super Bowl's next weekend, so I might not come work on the car. But yeah, I guess stay tuned. Hopefully next video this thing will be running.